of these cards, though.
That's
Which I'm very excited for. Oh, hey, welcome to Worse Than the Borg, Star Trek podcast for everyone. Each week, we unpack new episodes of Star Trek with Star Trek fans, new and old. We also showcase and raise funds for causes near and dear to us in the name of solidarity, reconciliation, and justice. I am Captain Shane Holland on board the USS WTTB. I am here with number one, Ron Sly. What's up, Ron?
Hello, Captain. How's it going?
Great. And our chief engineer, of course, Ravi Joshi. What's up, Ravi?
Nothing much, Shane.
Great to hear. We are here to talk about this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery, and I am excited to welcome aboard this week's special guest, one of my favorite guests we've had on, Ambassador Matty O'Donnell.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Welcome back for the first time.
Yes. Maddie, of course, is my partner of a long time and was our test guest on our pilot, our unaired pilot, which maybe we've teased one day we'll release, but we'll see. Before we go off, Ron, would you lead us off with our commitment to reconciliation?
Absolutely, Captain. This mission log is being recorded on Treaty 13 land, and the participants are committed to reconciliation here on Earth. We believe the United Federation of Planets would fully support the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. All tuned-in Terrans are encouraged to participate in the direct action discussed later in this log.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. So, Maddie, could you tell our listeners what your experience with Star Trek has been?
Yeah, sure. So I'm probably somewhere in this middle ground of folks who know some things, but not as much as other folks who know some things.
Yeah, that sounds middle ground.
Yeah. So my entry into the world of Star Trek really came with the Chris Pine, J.J. Abrams movies, and then gradually circled around through as many of the original Star Trek films as I could stay awake for.
Our largest fight to date might have been the time that Maddie fell asleep at the end of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
It was, yeah, I know. It's still
stings.
Still working my way back from that one. But yeah, so but I've seen all the Discoveries and all the Picard. So I've got like 2 full series sort of under my belt to this point. So I feel like that's a lot.
I mean,
you're modern Star Trek. You're who they're making the show for, frankly, at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Onboarding new fans.
Perfect. I like a lot of lens flares, so this is really
perfect. You're going to get a ton of them this episode. Speaking of, what did we think of this week's episode? I'm going to start. I loved it. Ravi?
This one was so action-packed. I was at the edge of my seat the entire episode, but it took me a while after watching it to do a bit of an inventory on like what wasn't in this. So like Saru was just not there. Saru and Culver and Adira just not there. They
totally proving one of our theories wrong, that Jonathan Frakes is going to conclude the Adira arc, which I'm shocked that that's not what it was so obvious when we said it out loud, like, oh, this is what they're doing with Jonathan Frakes, how cool. And then to not round it we'll get into it, sorry. Ronnie, what did you think of this week's episode?
I think maybe because I had that in my expectations, I kind of felt disappointed by this episode. And usually it's you two who I'm trying to pull back into, actually, this was a good episode. So we've kind of flipped roles. It was a solid episode of Star Trek. We love the, political conversation. But it didn't grab me the same way as many of the other ones. And that might just be on me for my own expectations.
No, that's totally fair and very valid. We'll get into it. And Maddie, what did you think of this episode?
So I thought that this episode of Star Trek was a really great episode of Star Wars.
Okay, elaborate.
There's so much. The way the storylines sort of unfolded and sort of overlapped on top of each other, where you've got this, very sort of intense, grounded negotiation conversation happening, which feels very, it's like when all the shit's going on Endor, and then Vader, the Emperor, and Luke are just like talking. Like, I had that kind of vibe. Also, I think this was a very cinematic feeling episode in general. The way it was shot was very, very artsy, I felt like. And I guess to bring it all around, in terms of that Star Wars-y feel, I felt overwhelmed by this episode, but in a good way. But like visually, emotionally, and like with these, not all obviously of the points coming to a head, but so many of the biggest points coming to a head. It felt epic.
I just started watching The Mandalorian yesterday, and I can see the connection.
Okay, so actually, on the topic of The Mandalorian, because what sowed the seed of the Star Wars feeling vibe for me is that in a season of The Mandalorian, there is a saloon set that is used repeatedly, and it reminded me a lot of the saloon set that was shown in the recap ahead of this episode, so that you remember what Zara's storyline was all about. So like from like moment one, I was like, yes, this feels like The Mandalorian that I've seen.
So I have a ton of stuff I want to talk about this episode. We're nearly there. I don't have a ton of Trek news this week, except to wish Nichelle Nichols a happy 88th birthday. She celebrated on December 28th, just before the New Year's. So, Nichelle, living long, prospering. We love you. Thank you for bringing Uhura to the screen and keeping her as an icon in our minds for nearly 60 years. Let's take a very quick water break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. This week we're discussing Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 12, the penultimate episode of this season, There Is a Tide. It was directed by one of our favorites, Jonathan Frakes, and written by Kenneth Lynn, who's written some incredible episodes this season. Ravi, do you want to tell us what happened in this episode? There's a lot of it.
There's a lot of it, and be warned, from this point on, there will be major spoilers. So, Burnham and Book use a perilous courier network conduit to reach Federation headquarters. Osira has tricked Admiral Vance into allowing Discovery in by pretending to be under attack by the Viridian. Book crashes his ship into the shuttle bay just before Discovery slips through the Federation shield. Book allows himself to be captured so Michael can disrupt the Emerald Chain's plan to retake the ship. Meanwhile, the bridge crew and Rin, the Andorian, are under armed guard in the mess hall while they're secretly come up with a plan of their own. A brief struggle ensues. Book and Rin give themselves up to allow Tilly and her crew to escape captivity. Osira reveals herself to Vance and requests a meeting. She wishes to negotiate a peace deal and bring the Emerald Chain into the fold of the Federation. When Vance suggests that Osira would have to pay for her crimes of slavery, extortion, and murder, Osira takes the deal off the table. Stamets is interrogated by the chain scientist Aurelio, who is looking for a way to replicate the spore drive. Burnham arrives, stuns the scientist, and rescues Stamets. She plans to send Stamets safely back to Federation headquarters so that the spore drive can't be used against them, stranding Saru, Culber, and Adira on the dilithium planet, amounting to a death sentence for the away team. Osira returns to the ship, where the captured Book and Rin reveal, in a bid to buy time, that there is a planet made of dilithium back in the Verubian Nebula. Osira sets course and murders Rin in cold blood. Tilly and the remaining crew prepare to rush the bridge when they encounter 3.23 bots who have been taken over by the sphere data and offer to help take back the ship. And that is the episode recap. Back to you, Shane.
I mean, what an episode. So much happened. I don't even know where to begin. So let's begin at the beginning. And Matty, what did you think about this opening crash landing Federation slipping in moment?
So is it going back to my my Star Wars comment. This chase through the courier network, like this felt very Mandalorian. It felt very Millennium Falcon. It was, and really, you know, the way it just sort of, you know, just gives the old rear penetration to the Discovery. You know, it was it's like nothing I've ever seen. Well, no, that's not.
It was very exciting. Yes.
Yeah. But it was just wild. And then I thought to myself, well, it's very lucky that no one was in that hangar.
I love that scene. I thought it was a nice nod to Star Trek V, one of the worst Star Trek films of all time, when James T. Kirk crash lands a shuttlecraft into the shuttle bay of the Enterprise A, I believe. But this entire hour was about 1,000 times more exciting than that movie, which also dealt with one of Michael Burnham's half-siblings, Sybok, who I guess she never knew about or never talked about. It doesn't really matter. This whole episode, I guess, was about connection and unity. Everyone's trying to reach for more connection, and that's, I think, felt the most in the scenes between Osira and Vance. It was a real surprise to me that they were setting up Osira to be this anti-heroine kind of character. For a moment, I had actually forgotten all of the extortion and slavery and murder, and I was like, oh, she just wants to be part of the Federation. And then, like, you know, he reminds everyone, like, oh, you're also a terrible person, and you should probably, you know, pay the price of your crimes. But did anyone else for a second think that that's where this was going, that they were actually going to make a deal?
I actually love that they've done this with Osira, because, you know, they did upend a lot of our preconceptions about who she was, what she was doing. You know, she's not just a mob boss. It's not just a crime syndicate. The Emerald Chain is the United States of America. And she's, you know, trying to legitimize. I mean, sorry, I should say, like, in their world, they have a legitimate governance structure that they consider to be useful and prosperous. And, you know, she's a minister. She's a part of a government that is overseeing this. And that reveal, I think, was really fun. And then we get into the, like, chit chat, and, like, we find out she's actually got more of an ego. Like, she's every other villain. She was the villain we expected. You know, she's happy, she wants peace, but only if it doesn't mean that she pays for her crimes.
Really want to give props to Janet Kidder, who plays Osira. If they kill her next episode and she never returns, I'll be very upset, because she is the foil that this show needs now that Giorgio is not in it. And there were just some amazing line deliveries, particularly when Vance tells her that the lie detection hologram, his name Eli, and she gives a little ha, like we all did when we realized that it was an anagram.
I love their chemistry so much between Admiral Vance and Osira.
Who knew that actor could have chemistry with anybody? That was another big reveal.
Yeah, he was. I really loved his character this episode. His living in the Greys way was very fun. If you told me that, if we learned later that, like, the Admiral and Osira are, like, you know, a couple of, like, bitter divorcees years later based on their rapport, I could totally it had those moments that felt just ever so slightly sitcom-y between the two of them, and it felt so comfortable, and it was so silly. I loved it.
Ravi?
This was a really fun episode. There was a lot that happened. It was very action-packed. It was very, like, heart palpitating, but there were some, I think, like, it came at the expense of maybe some quality and quality control. There were some things that were a little clunky, but also, like, the reveal that the Emerald Chain is anything more than a mob affiliation wasn't very much a reveal. It was just sort of like thrown in there as something that it wasn't built up. It would have been interesting to see some of the politics unfold over the last couple episodes, seeing that there's tension. But I felt that was a little bit hard to wedge through. At the same time, I really enjoyed. I think Vance is actually a really interesting character, and you see that tension that when he says. There's an important concept through this and Star Wars, by the way, where you have to actually show things to be true before you say that they're true. Otherwise,
Yes.
it's not going to work. And in this case, Admiral Vance saying, like, I have to make those decisions every day, where every second of every day, where I'm balancing, the need of a good and I've had to make compromises. It's so believable because we've seen it happen over the last season.
Mhm.
Whereas where Osiris saying, well, we have politics, and I've been trying to get through these human rights things. It's like,
what? Yeah. Since when?
where?
Yeah.
Since literally just now. So there's a little bit of that just trying to wedge in, but I'm giving it a bit of a pass because it was otherwise a very fun and exciting episode to watch. Sometimes you kind of have to wave your hand.
These last few episodes are revealing a bit about the writer's room. I really love the story that they've built over this season for the crew of the Discovery, but you're absolutely right in that it's come at the expense of some of the narrative of the world building that they should have maybe focused on. Because yes, the Emerald Chain being an actual functioning government, of course, makes sense. But at any point in the last 11 episodes, we could have seen an example of that. Instead, we just saw a slave camp, a trade market, and like capitalism run rampant. So yeah, it did feel very surprising.
I like the way that they did it. It's not the priority of the Discovery crew to understand the geopolitical stuff because they're so focused on fixing themselves and
the Federation,
their personal goals. And the reveal that it was such a blind spot to, like, the crew still doesn't know this, right? Like, we're the proxy, like we get to know it because we're in that room, but they still have this like very small world. We still don't know anything about 900 years into the future. So it might have been a bit clunky, but I really do love how they just like slipped it in Minister Osiris, and you're like, wait a minute, I've really got to start rethinking everything that I've seen this season.
Can I offer a counterexample of one of my favorite episodes of the season? So my favorite so much that I haven't actually remembered its name, the title of the, but it's the one with the Vulcan Romulan tribunal.
Unification 3.
Yeah, where they had to advance the plot, advance Michael's, thing, but they told you something that you didn't know about the Romulan thing and demonstrate it through this really dramatic thing. I think that that's a great example of the writers coming together and be like, okay, we got to tell this whole new universe that's unfolding. We have to give people glimpses, and we can't rush past it. I'm still waiting for the next iteration of that plot point of that universe to come back, and like, that's going to be so exciting when it returns. So I kind of feel like maybe that's where we're missing some stuff. The other thing, can I just note this might be a what the Trek thing, but why haven't we seen anything any other Starfleet ship? We haven't interacted with any of them. It's just Vance and Discovery, and there's been did they not like call? Like, are they not involved? Are their communications down? That was the weird thing that I was like, well, wait a second, how come Discovery's the only ship we've interacted with?
I honestly think it's a really convenient way for the writers to keep the focus on the actors that they have. And there are no, they're spread thin, and nobody can go as fast as Discovery anyway, so why would they even bother talking?
Go ahead. My Voyager J.
It's handy that they've been handily dispatched coincidentally every episode.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah,
very convenient.
They're there. They've just been on Kaminar for a little while.
I've totally lost my train of thought now. Because I'm thinking of like, why haven't we seen the captain of the Voyager J yet? I would love that. I think this kind of actually goes back to the whole individualism versus community thing that's been playing out for this season. The Discovery has very much been acting as individuals when clearly what the circumstances of this universe they find themselves in is that it is in desperate need of community right now. I think one of the the thing I loved most about the Vance and Osiris scene is that they both sides are like, we're failing here. We need each other, and we need to come up with some kind of compromise so that the universe can kind of function again.
Yeah, and I it's illustrated in the Stamets arc. He's our favorite punching bag, but his storyline.
Let's give Anthony Rapp some credit. What an incredible moment he gets at the end of this episode. I really loved it.
I was just in both times I watched through the episode, just in tears at that line. My life is in that nebula. Like
this is a comment from the Reddit thread, so I can't take credit, but the writers spent 12 episodes getting us to that line.
Yes.
Right? They've been trying to, as Ravi puts it, show, like, give Stamets the actual, the credibility, so that when he says that, like, we get it, and it's a big character development for him. He's not emotional like most of the other crew members. He separates all of this stuff. He usually can logically understand why you would make one choice or the other, but in this case he's finally started to build a family unit, and Michael is
ripping that
making the executive choice to take it away from him,
and it's hard to know who's right in that scenario because they're both very right. I mean, like, you cannot let Osiris steal this ship, but also everyone gave up literally everything so Michael wouldn't be alone in the 32nd century, exactly as he says.
Michael's making the choice that the bigger community takes precedence over his smaller one, and it's
right.
It's too bad that for him it got to, like, this moment, and we've talked a lot on this podcast about the, like, voyeurism of queer pain here. This man is in his 40s. He's just finally built a family unit filled with people who, like, live in alternate dimensions and things like that. And, he's got there. And then, our hero takes it away from him. Hats off to Rapp for making us care about Stamets, the most annoying character on the show. But,
listeners can't see Ronnie rolling his eyes, but they certainly can hear it.
So, I mean, what do we think is going to happen with the rest of the story? So, again, we talked a lot about how Frakes is usually directing Blue Del Barrio, and we're not going to get that for the final episode. And it seems like the Adira arc needs a tie off at the end of the season 2, or at least a cliffhanger. If they're not going to kill 3 of their queer characters all in the finale. Like, they just can't. Ravi,
are you ready for the bombshell? Are you ready for the bombshell?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not a hot take. We discussed this in the pre-episode. This is not a hot take. This is a well-established hypothesis that this next episode will be Saru's last episode.
Yes,
and the reason that might be true. The reason is somebody on the away team's going to die, or be stranded, or not exist, because there's just too much built up into that, and that Adira being written off the show would be pretty, like, cutting it. Like, can't do that, and you can't kill off Culber twice. You just can't do that.
I don't know. I think it might actually be Culber that they kill. They are really building Stamets' arc about having found a family and now he's going to lose it again. But this time it's a bit different in that he has Adira, who he has a bond with. I really can see that being the case. And I also, this might just be total conjecture. So on New Year's Eve, as I was walking to my day job early in the morning, someone ran past me in jogging gear, someone very tall and very familiar. And as they were putting on their mask, as they passed by me, I instantly realized that I was looking at the face of Doug Jones, Captain Screw himself. which to me says that he's here filming season 4 in Toronto. So I don't think that he's killed off.
That's the hot goss, listeners.
That's some real hot tea.
You heard it here first. Question: Does he jog with waving arms? 'Cause that would be so great.
Wish.
In heels.
I really don't want them, you know, they're all our heroes. We don't want them to kill anybody off. And they are doing this thing where they're modernizing Star Trek, but really we've only lost like 1 or 2 bridge characters in the entire franchise. And I get that modern TV takes a little bit more of this like drama stuff seriously, but like, we love these people. Like, let them be safe, please. Like, yeah. I want them to have their jobs. I want them to have their stardom. You know, like Saru. I want these characters to have their family. They put so much effort into Saru. You know, and I agree with Shane that it might be the Doctor who goes, because they're definitely making him a kind of Zen character about like coming to the end of your life, like he's been there before. I think like the character will be fine with it. And I just like, you know,
it's so rude to the gay people on this show, and
it's so rude to the gay people. And I just want an episode in 10 forward where everybody just chit chats about their life, and like, you know, we just haven't, that payoff has not ever come in this series.
22 short films about Discovery.
Yes, that's short treks.
Well, they did have the ironically that did kind of happen at Philippa Jojo's wake.
Okay, they already killed off a main player, so I am going to go out on a limb and say, you know, Tilly is telling us somebody's going to die. Oh, we haven't even really talked. You know, she's still developing her leadership skills and looking quite strong.
Did a great job this week.
Mm-hmm.
Did a great job.
Talk about a Zen character. The way she just sort of moved through decision making in this episode, which has just been historically such a sticking point for her character. Like,
yeah, and she's doing it in a way that you know, it's her own brand of leadership, femininity, individual personality. You know, she just is like walking through it straight. Like, whereas if, you know, we switch out Michael into that role, we've got a lot of intense stares and spoken whispers, and it's just Tilly going, so some of you are gonna die. Let's go. Like,
okay, yeah, sure, yeah. What did you say?
But I'm just gonna say that Tilly saves the day. Saru saves the day. This is what I want. Like, please, writers from 2 years ago who are making this up, like, the world just needs a happy ending. Please give it to us next week, please.
Do you love how Tilly? One of my favorite things with her leadership, it was that in the scene with the tapping, you don't necessarily like. She's inflaming the environment so much, so subtly with
don't say that
her
because
sarcasm.
She has ginger hair. Sorry.
Get out. But yeah, no, she's setting the tone with her sarcasm and just building up subtly that like you know, the edginess of the Imperial Guards. That when it comes time that they just start their tapping, they're like just enraged like that. I didn't get it at first, but she was so subtle about it, and that made me happy.
It's very classic Trek for the bridge crew to have an unspoken bond where they know what each other is thinking. There's definitely an episode of The Next Generation where they trap Q in a stasis field by looking at each other. And there are a lot of references to TNG, particularly the episode Starship Mine, where Picard is left alone and they're doing a barium sweep of the ship slowly, and he has to take out these invaders one by one. The whole plot of the ship being taken over by pirates is also stolen from the same episode. Classic.
One thing my favorite line in this episode, or one of my favorite lines, was when Tilly says, I realize I let you down, but I do have a plan. It's sort of like this really good nod to, like, they're still telling the story. Like, it isn't just resolved. Like, she isn't just like, oh, you know, I let let the ball drop, and now I'm suddenly better because we're under attack and I'm the underdog. They've left it unresolved. It's totally going to be a focal point for the next episode. It's totally going to be interesting. But they had to kind of check in with that, and I thought it was very tactfully done. It was just sort of like, yeah, she's kind of showing that she's vulnerable and not totally
still in
confident
charge
there. But I do have a plan, because there's only two roads. One is she gets large and in charge and takes over and wins the day, but that's not realistic. And the other one is she gets overridden and just allows things to happen without any agency. And she's like, they found this way of just taking her character and be like, I realize I let the ball drop, or words to that effect, but I do have a plan and I need you to trust me, is like a really good, that's a Tilly moment. That's a really great moment. So thumbs up for that.
I don't know if I've said this buzzword on the podcast yet, but it reminds me a lot of the conversations I've had about leadership with like in my real life. And it's a transparent accountability. So, we're all striving to do the best thing. We're not always going to do it. And we're also going to talk honestly about when that ball is dropped. We can accept, it doesn't necessarily have to be blame, right? Like, it's not necessarily Tilly's fault. There's a lot going on. We can talk about some root causes to the problems that led to the capture. But it doesn't serve anybody by putting on an air that, like, this could have happened differently if somebody had have done this or whatever. It's just talking honestly about it, about the structure that you're working in, and asking people to just trust that you are a good person and you are always striving to do the better thing. And it's captured in that line that Ravi said.
Yeah, and in Booker's response, that's sort of like, yes, we know you've got this. This is just what we need to do. Mm-hmm. Like managing that and keeping that confidence was a lovely exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Booker, just want to acknowledge the wonderful arc that he and Michael Burnham have had this season. I mentioned way back how lovely it was to see these two Black characters getting to be in love and not having that be the battle that they face, not having their Blackness be the battle that they face, or interpersonal relationship between them being the conflict.
There were some great moments where the conflict was happening entirely around them, right?
And they worked together. And they awesome. And their I love you, I know moment, which Matty coined for me when we watched it together, was really, really touching and beautiful. And I swear to God, if Booker is the one that they kill off, I will.
I mean, it makes it now that they are in this perilous situation, the payoff is there. We're not just getting Black representation as like cannon fodder. We've got these well-developed characters, which they didn't do with the queer characters on the show.
No, you're right.
And I just want to emphasize this point, which is that I Love You, I Know was brilliant because it was somewhat novel, at least in like mainstream movie making. I'm sure, I don't know, but it's not easy. Like, the one thing you're not supposed to do in writing is just like, it's so cliche and so tired to just say, I love you. Oh, I love you. And sitcoms run into this. By the 5th season, the couples have lost all their tension and they're just sort of saying stuff to each other. Mm-hmm. So for him to say, this isn't your first time, you talk a lot in her sleep. And for her reaction to be so like, with all this chaos, being like, oh my God. The writers deserve a lot of credit for taking what could be a really cliche, boring, like, moment, and actually using that dialogue to point back to the fact, to something that we have been shown, which is that they have this warmth cohabitation, that they have joy in their life, and that they are an actual functioning, secure couple. And so when she says, I love you for the first time, we're not being told that they love each other. We're affirming that what we've been shown is love. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's because so much like comedy and fiction revolves around tension and dysfunction, like that. Like functioning couples are notoriously boring to watch sometimes because they're just functioning, right? Like, let's watch two characters do a Sudoku together is a really boring episode. But I think that this is a really elegant way of having dialogue that reaffirms something you've been shown, and showing functioning, secure love in a way that's actually kind of dynamic and interesting to the plot as well. So just a really good moment, really beautiful. And yeah, I mean, she's been saying I love you in her sleep. That's very touching.
That's adorable.
Steph be damn, it's cheesy and we love it.
Like, it could be cheesier. Like, there could be a story where they've opted to like make this season about their love, and like half of these like flashbacks could have been, because there's so much time that they spent together, like a whole year of just them, you know, doing Sudoku and delivering packages together, that they could be flashing back to and being like, you know, this is how we sort of fell in love and got to this journey. So I
you know what?
To
go back to Ravi's point, like the writers did a great job in that they didn't show it and they still made us feel that way about those characters.
Exactly.
We spent a lot of time, you know, humming and hawing over whether the writers are doing a good job or not. I mean, they're doing a great job. We're nitpicking this stuff, partly because we love it, partly because, you know, that's the job that we've given ourselves here.
Self-assigned.
Yeah, it's self-assigned for sure.
Matty's comments are just like reminded me, like a bit tangentially, the weird timeness of all of these episodes, and it's reflected in the names of the episodes. So that year that we haven't seen, ostensibly there is a part 2, because season 3 episode 1's title is That Hope Is You Part 1. The name is part 1, so there should be a part 2.
Are you aware of what the name of the next episode is, Ronnie? It's That Hope Is You Part 2.
I finally getting the conclusion. I didn't see the name, but
spoiler alert. Sorry.
I mean, it goes on with you know, we've got the Unification 3, Terra Firma, Part 1 and 2, and then also that story is carried into the Citadel, which is like the following one, right? Like they're being a little bit coy with it. And, you know, I hadn't seen the update that it was that we're finally getting part 2, but that begs the question, like, are we going to get a resolution to the Saru story at all? If we're going to actually be dealing with, you know, there's so much storytelling to tell about what is supposed to happen next. And if we actually just go back to the beginning of the show before Discovery even comes, and then we have to like maybe wait for season 3 premiere or 4 premiere.
That would be so killer. So something I that really struck me about this episode was, you know, in terms of like the language of cinema and holding this anxiety over us of touching every storyline except the one that feels most immediate, which is the away team trapped on a planet with a ticking clock, and just the conscious decision to like put us through that. If they do that for another episode and then a break, I might die.
One of our previous guests talked about watching can't remember the title, but it's the first time we have a cliffhanger with the Borg in The Next Generation, and what it was like to go through that summer waiting to find out what happened to Picard. And with
both worlds,
streaming,
part 1 and 2.
Yes, thank you. And with modern streaming and binge watching, we usually get that resolution of feeling, which, you know, they're playing with it, right? Like we've got this story that started months ago now, and we're going to, I guess, get a conclusion to it, but at the expense of the rest of the content that we want to see. Or are they going to somehow cram it all in and make it all feel good in 40 minutes and give us just a capture of TV? They didn't know that they were getting season 4 when they finished season 3.
This is
and
true.
You know, season 3 is usually when shows get canceled in this online thing. Yes, that's when they get good.
It's the pass-fail moment for the show usually. I'm
still mourning the loss of the OA. We were getting set up for such a great story, and complex and weird and beautiful. And then, you know, the OA gave us Ian Alexander, for which we are grateful. However, like we wasted so many hours watching this story that we're never going to see the end to.
Yeah.
Well, do we know if they're going to be renewed for risk? A longer chunk? Because this is actually kind of maybe my problem, is that they don't know how much they need to set. Maybe that's part of the problem of season 3, is they don't know how much they're supposed to invest into their
the
characters.
future. Mhm.
Yeah, and so they're kind of just trying to shove it all in into one season. What they should be doing is sort of trickling this out and be granted a 3 additional season set. Do we know anything? Is it just season 4 that's
Just
signed on
season
to?
4, I think.
I think
they
just
got to
season
stop
4, yeah.
that. Come on, give us some
Actually,
layaway here.
Something's telling me in the back of my head that they did get a 2-season run. I'm gonna look it up on our next break, and we'll have an answer before the end of the episode.
Stay tuned.
There was so much that happened in this episode. I think we should actually take a break. We'll come back. We'll get to our What the Trek. We'll do our direct action for the week. So yeah, quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This week's direct action is actually tied to one of the actors who appears in this week's episode. So we want to take a quick moment to shout out Kenneth Mitchell. He has been on every season of Star Trek Discovery so far, but much like Doug Jones, we've only ever seen him in full prosthetic makeup. This week, we finally get to see Kenneth Mitchell in as himself, essentially, in the role of scientist Aurelio, or instigate. What was he called? Instigator, invigorator Aurelio. I want to say
Invigilator.
Invigilator, which also, is that how you pronounce that word?
I don't know.
Invigilator?
And isn't that someone who watches you take a test?
I mean, he's kind of watching. Anyway.
So first, I just want to talk about the character of Dr. Aurelio in this episode. A very interesting foil. First to Stamets, and then kind of as an observer to the brutality of Osira. I found it a little hard to believe that he's never seen this side of Osira in person, but I thought it was a really fun opportunity to, give Osira some backstory and some, for lack of better words, humanity. And also, we get to showcase an actor who is living with a disability, who uses a wheelchair. I know that on Twitter the hashtag CryptTrek has really been exploding. So I think this was, a really great episode to showcase someone we don't usually get to see in this kind of show that we've ever really seen in Star Trek featured prominently like this. Really awesome. Kenneth Mitchell, of course, revealed in early 2020 that he is living with ALS. And so for this week's direct action, I'm going to hand it over to Ronnie, who can tell us a bit more about what we're going to do.
Yeah, and I just want to add my 2 cents in about the representation, which we talk a lot about on this show.
It matters.
Mostly about race and gender and sexuality, but the representation of people with disabilities in a actually quite realistic for the show. He mentions, if I had lived in your time, I might not have to deal with this condition, because we're looking at somebody who is living in this sheltered position in a capitalist society, who understands that things could be better, but has had to make some sacrifices to get where he is. He's also a character who's reaching for that community. He's always, wanted to be a part of something, and he just doesn't see until the last frames of the episode what he's actually become a part of. So it was a great character written for a great actor who's been a part of the Star Trek community for a long time. And I don't know how this character came to be, but I like to think that they were just okay, we have this actor who has this disability, let's write it into the show, use it in a way that, again, it's not, they're not perfect around every moment, but I think I saw on the internet, maybe he's only the 3rd actor who uses a wheelchair to actually portray a character who uses a wheelchair. Usually they just take somebody who doesn't and puts them in a chair,
or famously, really, I think in the first season of Discovery, they had someone who uses a wheelchair, but they were literally just a background character, and you saw them wheeling off screen. There was no investment in the fact that they were even there.
Yeah, exactly. And that sometimes you can fix a disability and sometimes you can't. Fix is even a bad word for it, but it's totally valid just to live however you want to live. And I am really happy for Kenneth Mitchell to continue his, like, this seems like it might be a character that is recurring. They put a lot of investment. I hope so. This show is famous for giving us great characters and then taking them away. But I hope that his work in Star Trek continues. We get some more of him in Lower Decks. Like, he's clearly a talented person that has been hidden beneath prosthetic for too long. So let's have more. And just to button up this conversation, this week we're going to support the ALS Society of Canada. They provide support and services for people and families living with ALS in Ontario, which Kenneth Mitchell is one of those people. So if you want to join us and helping them try and make life better for what is honestly can be a very awful experience, please log on to their website, Google them, and give them your money with us.
als.ca/donate if you want to make a donation to them. We will be doing that, and we encourage all of our Terran listeners to do the same. Did anyone else want to talk about Kenneth Mitchell or the character of Aurelio before we move on? Yeah, Matt.
Just one thing that really struck me, and in terms of representation, and in terms of the how the character was presented in I thought the chair was really neat because it wasn't necessarily a chair. It was like character was essentially standing, like, mostly upright, was the same height as the other characters on stage. So I think it's kind of a neat approach to not just sort of like equality, but pushing toward equity just in how you physically present somebody.
Yeah, I really love that. And yeah, to that point, we've seen in Star Trek what the future of disability looks like, and so far a lot of what we've seen is that the future of disability is that there isn't any, or that it's flashy and hidden behind a visor. For it to be so prominent, for someone to be using a mobility device, I think it's really impactful. I think a lot of people are going to see this episode and feel seen.
And I noticed, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I noticed an even sort of a stammer and a harshness to the way that he kind of sentences, and that's a facet of a lot of disabilities, is that your speech is impeded in that way. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have Professor X, we've got Geordi LaForge, we've got, like, in sci-fi we do have examples, but the disability is sort of very tidy. And so to see something as much as a vocal, like, impediment or some way of communication challenge, it really just for some reason layered that on. And I made the reference point, is exactly like having a South Asian character with a South Asian accent. It's important that this be a holistic.
Was an interesting character who showed up and then never appeared again. What is that guy doing?
Is he still staffing an outpost? Is he?
He's just sitting there waiting to hear from Michael.
I really hope. I really do hope. But it's key that it's not too tidy. There are real day-to-day challenges there that we're not just, Geordi LaForge. I think his vision was even better than.
Yes.
So they didn't really actually. They may have stepped around sort of the actual challenges that can occur. So I thought that was really interesting. Very well, tastefully done. I'm really excited that this will be a character with a little, maybe not like a permanent character, but at least one that has a lot more screen time in the upcoming show and maybe season.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, Matty, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, like a sort of a change of heart, sort of switch sides, storyline could be really interesting.
It feels like they're building up to that.
Oh, he's going to be a defector for sure.
I just want to make one more last comment on, it seems like this might be related, kind of a product of the working environment that these people are sharing. It's not the People magazine era of, like, on-set bickering, Jerry Ryan and Kate Mulgrew, not having a good relationship, like, things are weird. Like, it seems like the human beings who are participating in the show are really loving it. Like, the writer's room is on Twitter. There's a Twitter account for Grudge the Cat. Like some of the actors will actually engage on Twitter, on Reddit, in posts, you know, and that, like, something that we've learned from that is Ian Alexander and Blue Del Barrio's arcs and scenes. They were given a lot of agency in influencing how the portrayal and representation looked. And I hope that Kenneth Mitchell was given the same privilege, because, and it kind of feels like it was the most informed take on a disability we've seen in Star Trek maybe ever. So I would give him full props for that, whether or not he did it. He's been in that community for such a long time. So I'm sure he's had his influence, which is great.
Of course, we're all saying this as people who are living without any obvious physical disabilities, so I just want to add that little caveat to all of this. But I speaking for myself, I thought it was a really powerful thing to see this week, and I hope other people see it.
When Crypt Twitter gets behind something, you know,
they're always on the forefront of good things. So
yes, we trust.
Yeah. And from the standpoint, though, of you know, pushing for more. One trope that I did notice, though, was the trope of the disfigured villain in Zora in his hand, which is another very Star Warsy feeling image, but
and very bonding.
Yeah. Good catch.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that leads us perfectly into our next segment, something that we talk about every week with our panelists, where we get to ask you, Matty, as a pretty casual viewer, someone who doesn't know all of Star Trek but knows a little bit, what to you made absolutely no sense, was morally questionable or otherwise confusing about this episode, the series, or heck, even the whole franchise. Matty, what the Trek?
Yeah, so I guess just generally, I'm wondering if you can provide me a little bit more information about Orion and the people from there, because so far, in my experience, I have seen them twice. They're the green people. Yes. I've seen two, I feel like, very stark examples. So you referred to the pilot of the pilot, and there were some folks from Orion in that episode.
That's a very lovely way to say that there existed a character they called the Orion slave girl.
Yeah. So yeah, and I guess and those, so to that point, those are two very different characters. There's the slave girl and the slaver. So like, is there anything more you can tell me about Orion? And I mean, yeah.
So I'll take a crack at this because
you've done well in the past.
I have watched Enterprise, which Shane has not, and they do a major retcon in Enterprise, which is the slave girl is the slaver. It's a female-led. The criminal organizations are led by women who use their pheromones or whatever. I mean, like, it's still sexist, awful, you know, it's
but they're using their sexuality for their
and they control the men to go and do their dangerous bidding, which is like it was 2004, I think, when they were doing that, and that was about the level of internet discourse on what equality is. So it's bad, but basically they started out as this green person alien that was just a very early idea of what aliens look like. They kind of tried to forget about them forever because it was very bad. They tried to retcon it poorly in the 2000s, and because they are such a fundamental early species, they haven't been able to totally drop them. They're just trying to spin it away from the awful connotations of the way the first writers put them on screen. And that's happening in two ways right now. We've got Tendi on Lower Decks, who is an Orion character, who is very
science driven and
being her own take. She's considers herself an Orion, but not an Orion in the way that everybody thinks of Orion people. So there's a couple throwaway lines in there that's adding some diversity to that group of people. And then, of course, we have Asira here, which in even the retcon, she's out there putting herself on the line. She's not just using her pheromones to whatever. So we're getting some indication that the Orion's culture has
shifted a little.
shifted a little away from where it was. So
it's still crime oriented and still
crime oriented,
matriarchal,
which is why we made all sorts of assumptions that she was just a criminal and not actually a government official. Although, like, do
that's
we know
on
that
us.
it's real,
That's
or
on
was
us.
that just them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she did barge in more like a criminal than a government official.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And she's done
And,
very
like,
criminal things.
Yeah, and I mean, even she apologized for it, and I thought that was.
Anyway, that's my basic rundown. I don't know if that answers your
No, it
question.
does.
But
I mean,
as with
basically-
everything Star Trek, they screwed it up
And they are
40 years
changing
ago,
it
and they're
constantly.
desperately trying to get back, but it's very hard to stay within canon.
Okay, but for a lot of it, it sounds like this is sort of the most we've learned or gotten to learn about Orion.
More or less. I mean, the Enterprise storyline was a bit larger for about Orion specifically. You know, this we only know about the Emerald Chain, which might just be Orion's, like the Viridian, the Emerald Chain, like they're very focused in on this green thing in a very punny way. But I don't think we still really know anything about Orion culture, and I think that's kind of the way they want it. Like, let's just have these
Mysterious villains.
there's an issue in Star Trek that they're also trying to get over, but they keep recommitting it, which is the culture of a planet is represented by basically like
one
somebody
person
from one, like a city. Like all Klingons are this way, all Tellarites are this way, all Vulcans, you know, and they have this, every planet has a monoculture, and it just isn't true. It can't possibly be true.
Maybe we're the exception, Ronnie. Maybe Earth is the only place where this polycultural thing has taken place.
I mean, I highly doubt it.
It's because there's a function to the, you know, if you back it all the way up and you say, well, this is a show about traveling the universe and interacting with other species, the fact that these species had like other singular personalities was a way of exploring humanity, right? Like that was the sort of thing. It's like, well, if the Klingons are violent and, you know, belligerent, and the Vulcans are logical, if you back it all the way up, it's this plot device that you need to you got the spaceship, you got a warp drive, and you're going to go and see different facets of humanity by seeing somebody else. So you can see the Roddenberry-esque kind of intent there, but then just realizing like, oh, wait a second, there are some grave consequences from doing that. So you can kind of see the innocence in it, but also be like, well, maybe we should move on. Maybe this was
that was the first draft thought.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like capturing a vacation in a postcard.
Yes, exactly. You don't hear the screaming children in the postcard. Matty, was there anything else that made you ask what the Trek this week?
No, just this entire episode though, I was just
oh wow,
completely focused on Osira, and just how, from a sort of how the sausage gets made sort of standpoint, like just some of the care that goes into how she's filmed as a green person. And so far this season, they've been, because so much of the effect, like there's makeup at play, but it's more lighting. And so they've been able to do that so far throughout the season really easily by like having her alone in shots, having her against dark black background,
being
so
a projection.
Yeah, so that they can just like, you know, shoot beams of like heavy green light at her. But this is sort of the first episode where we're starting to see her in well-lit environments and filmed alongside other characters. And you can see, like, the first time I sort of saw contrast was this moment where she's in engineering with Stamets and Aurelio. And instead of being filmed, like, over the shoulder, like she constantly is with Vance so that they can keep all the lighting off of him, she's actually, there's a moment where she's standing right next to Aurelio. And you can tell just texturally that the practical effect for her in that shot is all makeup. Like they couldn't pull the lighting trick. But in pretty much every other shot, they're able to, because you can see the reflections of the green light on her clothing and her hair. But in that, there's just that one shot where she's like standing next to him and sort of like the hand on the shoulder shot. And you're like, oh, she's just a little bit more textural there.
Yeah, I noticed a little bit of that too. Actually, there was one. You're right that they've been doing a really good job of lighting her in other scenes, but there was one moment when she's with Vance where like it's a real close up of her face, and I was like, wow, you can see like you can almost see the stippling of the paintbrush of where it landed on her face. I mean, it's a really beautiful makeup job. Hats off to the makeup team
It
at
made
Star
me
Trek.
wonder if she's naturally freckly under there. Like it almost looked like, you know, if they were to throw green on Tilly, would it
Oh.
have the same effect of modeling?
I wonder.
Go ahead, Ravi.
I just wonder if there's something technical there, like stage lighting, you know, with the different optics. If they're actually making up for, you know, back in the '60s they picked green for this one character, and and all the lighting and grips and all the people who do all their like, why did they choose green? I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
I'd love to see like a behind the scenes and just watch them fretting over these things, because these things matter, right? Like how the light or one particular type of green versus another, all of that's going to matter. So I just don't know the technicalities. So
Yeah,
love to hear it.
Hollywood has been, you know, insisting on making characters green at like the expense of actors and crew, like, you know, making the was it the
Wicked
woman
Witch of the West?
got violently ill and
Oh my god.
They were using like lead green paint on her skin, and I think she never really fully recovered from that.
yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so I was kind of waiting. Will there be a moment where Osira, you know, where we shatters the illusion and appears next to a character who's not green? And she did, and they managed it. It was exciting.
I want to give another shout out to just like the production crew here, and I don't actually think we can talk about like skin tone, photography and skin tone without like actually talking about how.
You're gonna steal my point right out of my mouth. Go ahead.
You take it. No, it's yours.
No, honestly, I was thinking this too, and really I was thinking about it while Matty was speaking too, is that for so many years, Black actors have been decrying how they can't get lit properly in a scene, because the standard, of course, is to light for white people, and Discovery having a black lead is one of the few shows, even when it aired, and that's only 3 years ago, it was one of the few shows on TV that specifically was like, we're going to do this right, and we're going to light all of our people so that they look their best no matter what their skin color. And it's something that is slowly happening in the film and TV industry. And yeah, the fact that they got the green lighting right, it is hats off to the fact that they've been getting their lighting right for 3 whole fucking years. Oh,
I mean, like, the world may not know, but Shane and I kind of attended the same film school for a while, and like, let me tell you, like, it wasn't a conversation. They taught us how to use a light meter and how to balance your like whites, but that was it. And it wasn't until the last couple of years where we're starting to see the actual, like, there was a shot a couple episodes ago, or I guess it was the last episode, where Book is entering sickbay with Grudge after having his DNA recombinated, and he was too dark to see, and I was like, oh, I can't believe it. But then he took a step forward and was completely perfectly lit. You know, like, this crew is like thinking about the broader stuff that they're doing, and that is something that, you know, it's with Kenneth Mitchell, with Blue Del Barrio, with Ian Alexander, with all of the, you know, Black directors and writers who are on the show. You know, we're finally getting this, like, a community is making a product for us, instead of just like Steven Spielberg being like, this is what I want and this is the way we're going to do it. So I really appreciate that. I highly recommend the documentary. If you're in Toronto, you can get it for free on Canopy, which is a service that you can get with your library membership. It's called Through a Lens Darkly, and it's a history of photography, mostly from an American's perspective, of Black photography specifically. Highly recommend checking out. And I also will just promote Michaela Cole's latest show. What was the name? Anybody have it off the top of your head?
I May Destroy You.
I May Destroy You. And I just have to shout out Michaela Cole's latest show, I May Destroy You. You know, it's watching something like that is like realizing how starved we are for like beautiful photography for Black people. And I say that as a white person, like, you know, like the just failing to see yourself represented in a way that is on level. You know, like we talk about like Twitter, you know, the friggin' algorithms there, they always pick the white person if there's two faces to focus on. It's so wild how much this is ingrained in our society. And it's a little offensive that, you know, it's the green characters who are making us realize, you know, they did such a great job, but why did they not do that forever for anybody with a different skin color?
Well said.
Sorry.
No, you're 100% right. Thank you. We're already doing it, but does anyone else have anything from this episode that we missed that we need to talk about?
I mean, the tapping with Reese and Bryce, it was cute, but we finally got to see like they've got kind of a Tom Paris, Harry Kim thing going on. You know, like bridge buddies, they've got their own little thing. So that was nice to see. Also, yes. Nilsson had a line like, what?
That wasn't Nilsson.
Changed? No, it wasn't. Okay.
So this brings up one of my points. What's happened to Nilsson? Last episode, they mentioned that Nilsson was doing something in engineering, helping someone do something because she obviously was not there. This week, she's obviously not there. They've replaced her with some brunette. Like the actor is away, is sick, something happened, but just don't have that extra in there. We can get by with Detmer, Owo, Reese, and Bryce.
Yeah, it was weird. Thanks for letting me know that it was a different white lady.
Oh shoot, I was gonna say they're all interchangeable, but
can I just say my favorite little thing that just brought me such glee, and I guess there are a lot of them for this episode, but this one tops them all, is toward the very beginning when Admiral Vance is having like an Aaron Sorkin walk around the space station with his subordinate, and they teleport from the lower level to the mid-level, like mid-conversation without skipping a beat. And it's Aaron Sorkin the entire time.
It's the West Wing and the East Wing. Just so
yes.
So this was actually like super nerd alert, caught by a Reddit user during that conversation. The audio follows them in real time, and there's a kind of important difference between the flashes that we're seeing, which in the original shows, especially the early shows, it represented the time that it took for them to be transported from one place to the other, and it just like conveniently takes 3 minutes of special effects so that we can fill out our hour.
3 minutes. Oh god, transporting used to take so long.
There have been some very long transports. I'm actually like super nerds out there. Let me know what show has the longest transport.
Prawn.
Okay.
It's block by block.
The flashes now, though, it does seem to be just like indication of the transport happening and not representative of the time that it takes, because they seem to be doing it instantaneously, which is different.
Can I just mention that unfortunately I'm seeing too much similarity between the maintenance robots and Wally.
Eva.
And Eva. And in particular, it's the usage of an old-timey movie as a form of communication between you and like, come on. This is too much. This is just too much. Like, and they're floating and they're kind of too cartoony and they're going to save the day at one point. And I'm just getting a little bit icky about it. Like, save ourselves.
This weird kind of C plot that's been happening for the entire season with the super intelligent computer that only shows up every now and then. But at least we finally got the payoff of why the little dot machines are in the opening sequence. You know, we knew they were going to be important for something. And now we've got this like really cute R2D2 type situation happening where we love this. We're just going to like put all of our anthropomorphic feelings onto these machines, and you know, hopefully they don't get destroyed, because
it's already worked on me.
Yeah.
Did anyone notice that their eyes are the 3 primary Star Trek colors? Each one had like, oh my god, so cute. I loved it. Ravi's shaking his head, looking at me like I'm
not on board. I'm not on board. We had our Ewoks. The Ewoks were a long time ago. We got rid of them. Okay, let's move on. This franchise doesn't need Ewoks. That's all I'm gonna say.
I mean, yeah, it's absolutely the Star Warsification of Star Trek, but I'm Team Dot. Sorry. Great send off for Noah Averback Katz, I want to say is his last name, who plays Rin, Mary Wiseman's real life husband. He did a great job this season. I mean, strange character. I can't believe we put so much time and energy into him just for him to be obliterated in an instant.
I share that disappointment. We talked a lot during the episode where we're introduced to him about how his character dies by the time they get to the spaceship, and he lived, and they gave it to us in the background for a couple episodes, and then he had to have his redemption death anyway. It just seems like a waste.
Yeah, definitely.
They're kind of binging on characters. Like, they've got the bridge characters, there's expanse of them, and they can just kind of throw them in. They could probably have 30% fewer characters and just write them differently. Like, why couldn't Rin, his actions throughout this episode or season just being carried out by, I don't know, Bryce or one, add a layer to another bridge crew? And it's just sort of let's create another. It's like they're free. You just create new characters whenever you want. It's wearing thin a bit.
A little bit.
It's a little annoying, but supporting the Toronto economy by keeping all of our actors in work. So
amen. Yep. Also, I'm sure that Noah is going to be back sans prosthetic or it donning new prosthetics in the next season, because
Star Trek Discovery is the biggest
nepotism scandal.
Famously, lots of background people who reappear over the years as different characters. We're getting that with the character who plays Nielsen and Ariam. We've got Kenneth Mitchell, who has appeared in every season so far as a different character. We are 100% going to see more of this actor because he lives with Mary Wiseman and they can commute together to work, so it makes sense.
Yes. That's actually a really long-standing tradition of having actors appear in multiple roles in Star Trek, and it totally
it's never been so prolific as this one, though.
No, it's or more obvious, except maybe the exception being Jeffrey Combs, who was every alien in Deep Space Nine, and it was very obvious because he has such a distinct voice and personality. But it also reminded me of Transporter Chief Lieutenant Kyle from the original series, who passed away in 2020. I found out the other day. So rest in peace, Lieutenant Kyle, wherever you are.
I'm just looking at Jeffrey Combs' Memory Alpha page, and it just keeps scrolling. My God. But he's a great actor. That's part of it, is he's a great actor. So
yes. Well, I've exhausted my notes. I think you all have too. So I want to thank once again our special guest, Matty O'Donnell. Thank you so much for being here, Matty.
Hi.
Hi. And we're starting the podcast now.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Hit record.
Yeah. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Matty. We are Worse Than the Borg. You can follow us on Twitter at Worse Than Borg or at Worse Than the Borg on Instagram. You can email us at worsethantheborg@gmail.com. And please remember to subscribe, rate us 5 stars. As always, thank you so much for listening. We have been Worse Than the Borg. You have been assimilated into our collective, but resistance is never futile. Thank you so much.